What if the most romantic stories ever told are actually dark narratives centered on kidnapping, obsession, and devastating bargains? We are used to treating the myths of gods and mortals as beautiful fairy tales, but today, we're going to strip away the gilded exterior and dive into the true core of these stories. We'll break down 5 of the most famous legends to distinguish genuine affection from the mere games of the divine ego. You might be surprised how modern and ambiguous these ancient legends feel when you pay attention to the details. Get ready. We're setting off on a journey that will force you to rethink everything you know about love, sacrifice, and immortality. And the first question we need to ask is this: was the jealousy of the goddess of love more destructive than her blessing? But before we dive in, let's pause for a moment. For the ancient Greeks, myths weren't merely entertainment. They were their fundamental framework for understanding the world. The changing of the seasons, the power of art, the nature of love and death, all of these elements were reflected in their divine narratives, and the unions between immortals and mortals held a particularly special significance. These pairings served as a bridge between 2 worlds, simultaneously revealing the immense majesty of the gods and their surprising humanity. In these tales, they experienced jealousy, they suffered, and they made monumental mistakes, just like we do. But these myths also acted as powerful cautionary tales. They highlighted just how fragile and dangerous love becomes when one partner possesses limitless power. Therefore, every story we examine today is not just a classical romance, but a complex drama about power, fate, and the true consequences of choice. We'll start with a story often considered the very definition of romance, the myth of Cupid and Psyche. It all began with beauty. A mortal girl named Psyche was so stunning that people started worshipping her, completely forgetting about the actual goddess of love, Aphrodite. Can you imagine the goddess's fury? Her altar stood empty, and all the honours were being paid to some mere girl. Aphrodite decided to punish Psyche in the most cruel and ingenious way. She summoned her son, the god of love, Cupid, and commanded him, "Make her fall madly in love with the ugliest, most wretched mortal you can find." The girl's fate seemed sealed. Armed with his arrows, Cupid set off to carry out his mother's wish. He found the sleeping Psyche and was ready to strike. But he froze, utterly captivated by her beauty. In that instant, he accidentally grazed himself with one of his own arrows. And that, right there, is where everything changed. The god of love himself fell hopelessly in love with the very person he was sent to destroy. Aphrodite's revenge plot crashed and burned, giving birth to one of the most incredible love stories ever told. Cupid couldn't simply show up to Psyche and declare his love. After all, he was a god, she was a mortal, and his mother was plotting revenge. So he decided to resort to trickery. Following the oracle's advice, Psyche's parents took her to a high cliff, intending to offer her up as a bride to a terrifying monster. But instead of the monster, the gentle west wind, Zephyr, swept the girl up and carried her away to a magnificent enchanted palace. There she had everything she could ever wish for: lavish chambers, invisible servants, and exquisite food. Every night her mysterious husband would visit. He was tender, affectionate, and kind, but he set one single condition: Psyche must never look upon his face. The girl was happy, but her curiosity gnawed at her. Fueled by her jealous sisters, they convinced her that her husband was, in fact, the very monster mentioned in the prophecy. And so, one fateful night, Psyche armed herself with a lamp and a dagger and resolved to break the prohibition. She held the lamp up to the face of her sleeping husband and saw the beautiful god, Cupid. In her astonishment, her hand trembled, and a drop of hot oil fell onto the god's shoulder. He woke up in pain, looked at her with an accusing gaze, and vanished. The palace and all the magic dissolved into thin air, leaving Psyche alone in utter darkness and despair. Realizing what she had lost, Psyche resolves to do anything to win her beloved back, and her path leads her straight to Aphrodite's temple. The goddess of love, upon seeing her rival utterly broken and begging for help, decides to savour her revenge to the fullest. She declares that she will assist Psyche, but only if the mortal girl completes 4 seemingly impossible tasks. First, she had to sort an enormous mountain of mixed grains overnight. Next, she needed to retrieve the golden fleece from vicious murderous sheep that killed anyone who dared approach them. The third task was to collect water from the river Styx, which flowed through the realm of the dead. And the last, most treacherous demand, she had to descend into Hades' underworld and beg his wife, Persephone, for a portion of her divine beauty contained in a small box. Aphrodite was certain the mortal girl would perish, yet Psyche was aided by nature itself and sympathetic gods. Ants sorted the grain, a talking reed advised her how to collect the wool, and Zeus's eagle gathered the Styx water for her. But the final quest remained the most perilous of all. Psyche descends into the underworld. She successfully navigates all the horrors, follows every instruction, and receives the coveted box from Persephone. But on the journey back, curiosity gets the better of her once more. She thinks, if I take just a single drop of this divine beauty, my husband will surely forgive me. She opens the casket, but instead of beauty, a lethal, icy sleep escapes, and Psyche collapses, lifeless. It is at this critical moment that Cupid appears. He has recovered from his injury, and unable to stand his beloved's suffering any longer, he rushes to her aid. He seals the slumber back into the box, and wakes Psyche with a gentle prick of his arrow. Knowing that his mother would never leave them in peace, Cupid flies straight to Mount Olympus, seeking Zeus himself. He recounts the entire story to the king of the gods, and Zeus, touched by such profound love and devotion, decides to intervene. Zeus calls a council of all the gods and announces that Cupid and Psyche shall officially be joined as husband and wife. He gives Psyche ambrosia, the divine drink of immortality, to sip, thus making her a goddess herself. Thus, the mortal girl became a goddess through the sheer strength of her love, and even Aphrodite was finally forced to relent. Let us now turn our attention to a story that still sparks the most heated debates, the myth of Hades and Persephone. Many know it simply as a tale of brutal abduction. Persephone, the young daughter of Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, was walking carefree in a meadow with her companions. Suddenly the ground split open. From the depths, Hades, the grim ruler of the underworld, emerged in his black chariot. He seized the maiden and dragged her down with him into the world of shadows. All of this occurred with the silent blessing of Zeus, who had promised his daughter to his brother without even consulting her. On the surface, this is a classic narrative of violence and abuse of power. A helpless young woman becomes the captive of a terrifying and mighty god. And yes, the initial act was an abduction. There is no argument there. But if we dig a little deeper, the story becomes far more complicated. Hades, the ruler of a vast yet lifeless realm, was profoundly lonely. He was not evil, as he is often portrayed. He was the god of order, justice, and inevitability. And in Persephone, he saw more than just a beautiful maiden. He saw the one who could share his eternity and bring light into his dark kingdom. So, what exactly happened to Persephone in the underworld? Contrary to popular belief, Hades did not treat her like a prisoner. Instead, he treated her with respect and reverence, offering her the chance to become his queen, ruling by his side as an equal. He showed her his domain, filled with untold treasures, offering a power she could never have imagined while living on Earth. Gradually, Persephone began to change. The naive maiden transformed into a wise, even stern, ruler. She became the sole living entity in the realm of shades, a vital symbol of life planted amidst death. And this brings us to the key detail of the entire myth, the pomegranate. Hades, knowing that eventually others would come seeking Persephone's return, offered her several pomegranate seeds. According to the rigid laws of the ancient world, anyone who consumed food in the realm of the dead was bound to remain there permanently. Was this a deliberate, cunning ploy? Absolutely. However, some interpretations suggest Persephone ate them willingly, having already accepted her new role and developed a genuine affection for her silent, powerful husband. She found her true place, not as a victim, but as a legitimate and powerful queen. But what about the world above? Persephone's mother, Demeter, was absolutely consumed by grief. The goddess of the harvest abandoned her duties, plunging the world into an endless winter. Crops failed, and humanity began to starve. Demeter wandered the world searching for her daughter, her sorrow literally freezing the life out of everything she passed. The pleas and persuasions of the other gods meant nothing to her. She issued an ultimatum to Zeus. Until her daughter was returned, not a single stalk of grain would ever grow again. Seeing that humanity faced total extinction, Zeus was finally forced to intervene. He dispatched Hermes, the messenger, to the underworld with an explicit order for Hades to release Persephone. Hades bowed to the will of the supreme god, but this was the exact moment those infamous pomegranate seeds came into play. Persephone had already bound herself to the underworld. She could no longer simply return to her former life as if nothing had happened. Her fate was sealed forever. This event underscores that even the most powerful deities cannot always undo the consequences of their own choices. The initial agreement was broken, and a new compromise had to be forged. This setup led to one of the most elegant compromises in all of mythology. Having consumed the pomegranate seeds, Persephone was bound to the underworld and could not fully abandon Hades. Yet, Demeter was equally resolute. The eventual agreement stipulated that Persephone would spend 2/3 of the year above ground with her mother. During this joyful period, spring and summer, nature would flourish and bear fruit. For the remaining third of the year, she would return to the underworld to rule alongside her husband. This was the time of Demeter's sorrow, bringing autumn and winter to the land. In this way, the tale of abduction was transformed into the enduring myth of the changing seasons. But more importantly, it evolved into a narrative about a complex adult union. Persephone became the bridge between the world of the living and the world of the dead. She was no longer just a victim. Instead, she claimed 2 homes and 2 roles: the innocent maiden, Kor, and the formidable queen of the dead, Persephone. And her relationship with Hades transformed from an act of kidnapping into a powerful partnership, a sovereign alliance between 2 solitary rulers who found a unique and profound understanding in one another. The following story is a testament to the power of art and a love bordering on madness, the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus was no mere mortal. He was the son of the muse Calliope, and his talent was truly divine. When he played his lyre and sang, all of nature stood still. Wild beasts would lie down at his feet, trees would bend their branches, and rivers would halt their flow. His music could melt even the coldest heart. Yet he gave his own heart completely to the beautiful nymph Eurydice. Their love was perfect, as harmonious as his own compositions. It seemed that nothing could ever darken their happiness. They married, but at their wedding, Hymen, the god of marriage, spoke a prophecy that, alas, proved to be ill-fated. Shortly after the ceremony, Eurydice was walking through the woods when she was bitten by a poisonous serpent. The venom acted instantly, and she died, leaving Orpheus utterly alone. The world lost all colour for him. His music, which was once joyful, now became the very embodiment of sorrow. His songs were so heart-wrenching that nymphs, satyrs, and even the gods themselves wept on Olympus. Orpheus's grief was so profound that he resolved to do the unthinkable, to descend into the kingdom of the dead and retrieve his beloved. No mortal had ever attempted such a feat before him. Armed with nothing but his lyre, he made his way to the gates of Hades, and once again his music worked wonders. Cerberus, the fierce, 3-headed guardian of the underworld, obediently lowered his tails and let him pass. The sullen ferryman, Charon, who rose the dead across the river Styx, became so entranced by the music that he ferried Orpheus across for free, a service he had never before rendered. Orpheus finally reached the throne of Hades and Persephone themselves. He did not plead or make demands. He simply began to sing. He sang of his love, his past joy, and his immeasurable sorrow. His music was so beautiful and profoundly mournful that, according to myth, all torment in the realm of the dead ceased for the first time ever. Ixion's wheel stopped spinning, Tantalus forgot his unending thirst, and Sisyphus paused, resting upon his stone, just to hear the sound. Even the severe Furies, the goddesses of vengeance, wept. Persephone herself, queen of the underworld, was moved to the very core of her soul. Moved by his music and the sheer force of his love, Hades and Persephone agreed to something unprecedented. They allowed Eurydice to return to the world of the living. But there was one condition, a stipulation that would severely test Orpheus's faith and his resolve. He was to walk ahead, and the shade of Eurydice would follow him, and under no circumstances was he to turn around and look at her until they both reached the light of the sun. If he turned back even a second too soon, she would be lost forever to the realm of the dead. It seemed like a simple enough condition, but imagine the journey itself, a long, agonizing path through the dark, silent corridors of Hades. Orpheus could not hear Eurydice's footsteps behind him, for the shades of the dead are completely silent. He was tormented by doubt. Was she truly following him? Had the gods deceived him? What if he was making the ascent alone? Every single step was an immense struggle. He fought the overpowering urge to turn back, just for a glimpse, to confirm his beloved was still by his side. This wasn't just a road. It was a torture fueled equally by hope and fear. And just like that, he was almost at his goal. The light of the living world beckoned ahead. He stood right on the threshold, the sun's rays already warm on his face. But in that final, crucial moment, with just a single step remaining, he couldn't resist. Overwhelmed by sheer joy and impatience, he forgot the condition, turning back to share this triumphant moment with Eurydice. And he saw her. She was there right behind him, her shadow almost solidifying into flesh. But his glance became her death sentence. With a quiet, parting moan, she began to melt, dissolving back into the darkness. He reached out his hands, but grasped only emptiness. The gates of Hades slammed shut before him, forever. A living man could not enter the realm of the dead a second time. Orpheus lost his love twice, and this time the blame was entirely his own. He spent the rest of his life in solitude, his music growing ever more sorrowful. He spurned the affection of other women and was eventually torn apart by the Bacchant. Yet his story remains an eternal symbol of the immense power of love and how a single moment of doubt can shatter everything. But now, let's turn our attention to a love that is quieter, yet no less overwhelming. A love that has become synonymous with eternal beauty and profound tranquility. This is the legend of Selene, the moon goddess, and the mortal youth, Endymion. Endymion was said to be a shepherd, though some accounts claim he was a king of Elis. But regardless of his station, all myths agree on one crucial point. He possessed unparalleled, breathtaking beauty. Each night, as Selene drove her silver chariot across the heavens, her path took her directly over Mount Latmos, where Endymion slept, and every night she would deliberately slow her celestial journey just to gaze upon his perfection. She watched his tranquil face, seeing the way the moonlight danced in his hair, and in her immortal heart a deep love began to bloom. This was not the fiery, consuming obsession often displayed by the other gods and goddesses. Instead, it was a tender, profoundly contemplative affection. She fell in love with the very embodiment of serenity and grace, but she was a goddess and he was mortal. The inevitable shadow of his future mortality, of aging and death, was cast over her eternal devotion. She knew that his unparalleled beauty would inevitably wither, and his life would tragically come to an end. Selene simply couldn't bear the thought of losing her beloved. But what could she possibly do? Every night she secretly descended from her chariot, coming down to earth, just to be near him. She would lie beside the sleeping Endymion, kiss him, and speak to him, even though he couldn't hear a word she said. These stolen moments were utterly priceless to her. But time marched on, and her fear of his inevitable aging grew stronger and stronger. She couldn't bear the thought of watching wrinkles map his beautiful face, or seeing his body weaken. She desperately wanted to preserve him exactly as she had fallen in love with him, eternally young and beautiful. Unlike many other gods who simply took what they desired, Selene was faced with a profound dilemma regarding immortality. How could she preserve something that was, by its very nature, destined to fade? Her love was silent and secret, yet no less profound because of it. She refused to share him with anyone, not even with time itself. And so, she resolved to take a desperate step to appeal to the most powerful of all the gods, Zeus. Selene stood before Zeus and poured out her heart. She confessed her love for the mortal shepherd and voiced her deep fear. She pleaded with him to grant Endymion eternal life. Zeus, moved by her plea, agreed to help, but insisted that Endymion himself must make the final choice. He offered the young man the power to choose his own destiny. This is where the versions of the myth slightly diverge. In one telling, Endymion, understanding that he could never truly share eternity with a goddess, chose eternal sleep himself. This slumber would keep him eternally young, protecting him from sorrow, pain, and disease. In the second, more common version, the choice was made either by Selene, or it was a non-negotiable condition set by Zeus himself. Regardless of who decided, the choice was final. Endymion was plunged into a deep eternal sleep, preserving his youth and beauty forever. He did not die, yet he could not live a complete life. He was frozen in time, becoming an eternal, magnificent statue, a living work of art shaped by the devotion of a goddess. And here we find the end of the tale. Endymion slumbers in eternal sleep in a cave on Mount Latmos. He is immortal, forever young. Every night, his lover, Selene, descends to be by his side. She can gaze upon him, she can stay near, yet she can never speak to him, never receive a responding smile, and never share the simple joy of wakefulness. It is a beautiful yet infinitely mournful tableau. The goddess got exactly what she desired. She preserved her beloved's beauty, but the cost was staggering. She condemned him to a form of non-existence, and herself to eternal solitude right beside him. This myth speaks of objectifying love, the desire to possess beauty rather than a human soul. Can we truly call this ideal love? Or is it the ultimate expression of selfishness, preserving the loved one as a flawless object while stripping him of life itself? This story leaves behind a distinctively bittersweet aftertaste, forcing us to consider that sometimes love demands not preservation, but the courage to let go. And finally, the fifth story, the most passionate, bloodiest and tragic of them all, the myth of Aphrodite and Adonis. You would think the goddess of love herself would know a thing or two about happy endings, but her own greatest romance turned into an absolute disaster. Adonis was a mortal youth, yet his beauty was so flawless that Aphrodite herself fell for him. And I mean, she seriously fell for him. The myth says she was accidentally wounded by an arrow shot by her own son, Cupid, and the first person she saw afterward was Adonis. From that moment on, she was utterly obsessed. The goddess, who had previously only been accustomed to languishing in luxury on Mount Olympus, dropped everything. She became a huntress just to spend more time with her lover, who absolutely adored the chase. She followed him through forests and mountains, wore simple clothes, and completely abandoned her divine duties. She, the mistress of passion, had now become its slave. She was so completely consumed by this love that she lived in constant fear for Adonis's life, knowing he was only mortal. Aphrodite constantly cautioned her beloved. She pleaded with him to avoid hunting large, dangerous beasts, lions, wild boars, and bears. Be bold when facing the timid, she insisted, but against the truly fierce, your courage is a deadly risk. She recounted tales illustrating the danger of defying the wild, begging him to exercise caution. But Adonis was young, impetuous, and dangerously overconfident. He dismissed her warnings as mere feminine weakness and paid them no mind. For him, tracking a perilous beast was the ultimate test of honour and valour. This is where the myth presents its classic conflict. An all-knowing goddess, rendered helpless by her love, facing a mortal man who cannot escape his ultimate destiny, his doom. Furthermore, there was another key player in this drama. Ares, the god of war and Aphrodite's established lover, was consumed by uncontrollable jealousy. He could never forgive the goddess of love for her reckless obsession with a mere mortal, and he bided his time. One day, while Aphrodite was away, Adonis went hunting. His dogs tracked down a massive wild boar. Full of the thrill of the chase, Adonis hurled his spear and wounded the beast, but this only served to madden the boar. It pulled the spear from its wound and charged the young man. Adonis didn't have time to evade the attack. The beast drove its tusk deep into his thigh, inflicting a mortal wound. According to one version of the myth, that boar was Ares himself, who had taken the animal's form to exact revenge upon his rival. Aphrodite, though far away, heard the dying groans of her beloved. She rushed to him, but she was too late. She found his lifeless body lying in a pool of blood. The goddess's grief was boundless. She cursed fate, the gods, and her own immortal nature, a nature that forbade her from following her lover into the realm of the dead. She embraced his body and wept, her tears mingling with Adonis's blood as they fell to the earth. Yet even in the depths of her sorrow, Aphrodite refused to let the memory of her beloved fade away completely. She resolved to immortalize him within nature itself. Where every drop of Adonis's blood fell upon the earth, a beautiful yet tragically fleeting flower sprang up, the anemone. Its petals were as vibrant as the youth's blood, and as delicate and fragile as his brief life. But the tale did not end there. Aphrodite's grief was so profound that it moved even Persephone, the queen of the Underworld. She allowed Adonis to return to the world of the living for half a year, to spend that time reunited with Aphrodite. Thus, Adonis, much like Persephone herself, became a symbol of nature's annual death and rebirth. His passing and subsequent return explained the changing seasons, but at its core, this is a myth about an all-consuming passion that ultimately cannot defy death. It is a story showing that even the goddess of love is powerless before the laws of life and fate, and that the most beautiful love can be destined for tragedy from its very beginning. So, what is the ultimate takeaway? 5 distinct stories, 5 different facets of love. We moved from the self-sacrifice of Psyche, who earned her immortality, to the tragic error of Orpheus, who lost everything due to a single fatal moment of weakness. We explored the complicated union of Hades and Persephone, a relationship that evolved from abduction into a true partnership, and the quiet, chilling obsession of Selene, who turned her mortal beloved into an eternal, preserved relic. And finally, we witnessed the fierce passion of Aphrodite, which proved utterly powerless against the finality of death. These myths collectively underscore one truth: love between a god and a mortal is inherently a story of radical inequality, immense risk, and an unbelievably high price. They are not sweet fairy tales, but profound dramas about power, free will, and the crushing inevitability of fate. They teach us that love is not merely a gift, but a profound test. And sometimes the most exquisite stories are the most deeply tragic. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. If you found this interesting, please make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It really helps us grow. Now, I have a question for you. Which of these 5 stories did you find the most romantic? And which did you find the most unsettling or eerie? And do you believe that this kind of all-consuming love can truly exist in real life? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm really interested to read what you think. Until next time.